In 1970, there were 26 students and a bus driver, were kidnapped by 3 men. They were imprisoned in a truck and buried the truck underground. Our question: what is the purpose of the 3 kidnappers? And why were they buried in the ground? Can they survive or perish in underground? Before we start our story, if you are new to this channel, click the subscribe button, and don't forget to like this video, so you are always updated in life amazing stories. In 1976, in Chowchilla, California, there was a bus driver who always delivered 26 students to Dairyland Elementary School. This bus driver was Frank Edward Ray. He had been working as a bus driver for a long time. The people in their town knew him. In fact, the students he serves are still grandchildren of his classmates. The age of the students is 5 years old to 14 years old. On July 15, 1976, a normal day for Ed and the students, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And here the students went out to go home boarding, 19 female and 7 male students on Ed's bus. He started the bus and they went through the route they pass every day. But as Ed was driving down the road, he noticed just in the distance with a damaged van in the middle of the road. He slowed down, until he stopped in front of the broken van. When he turned around, he saw another van on the side of the road. And because he also knows how to fix the car, so he planned to get off to help the broken van. But when he was getting off the bus, suddenly someone punched him in the stomach, so he immediately fell down. He saw 3 armed men wearing masks. When moving, Ed was focused. He had a gun to his head. He was told to sit in the driver's seat and drive the bus. The 2 masked men got off the bus and drove to the 2 vans while the bus was convoying. Ed was driving, while the gun was pointed. Ed was very nervous and didn't speak. Because he knew that when he spoke, the students who didn't know what had happened might be ruined, while everyone was quiet. A student spoke and asked the masked man, "Sir, are you an Easter bunny? Your mask is like a rabbit." This is the question of the unconscious child. Ed is nervous, because he thinks he might shoot the child. But the masked answered, "Yes, I am an Easter bunny and we are going to Wonderland, so just shut up first." Students are very happy with his answer. A few minutes have passed. They have come close to river, where the students were going down, and Ed divided them into 2 groups to board 2 vans. When they were all on board, the kidnappers closed the back of the van and locked outside. Ed observed inside of the van, and when it started, they could hear the soil and small rocks falling under the van. Ed looked at his watch, so he knew what time they left. They didn't even have food and water in the van, and then the passing through the rocky roads, so the children fainted and vomited inside. They can't see outside, because the windows are covered. The others are already urinating in their shorts. The little kids, asking what time they will go home, because they are hungry. So, what the older students did was they just sang nursery rhyme, so they don't get bored and scared. 11 hours later, the driving stopped. The van and 3 kidnappers opened the van and they got off one by one. Edgar looked around, and he noticed this place was a quarrying site, 100 miles away from Chowchilla. Ed looked his watch, and he was surprised because it was 3:30 in the morning. While the masked man was lowering the children, asking one by one names of the students. They were very hungry and very scared of what happened. Ed could not quite understand why did the kidnappers target them, because the kidnappers did not talk about their plan of the students. He already knows that any time the kidnappers can kill them. A few minutes later, the kidnappers took them to a pit. Ed was surprised because he saw in the pit that there was a truck placed in it almost 12 feet. The depth of the pit, the truck has a hole in the top of the roof. In its hole, there is a small stair. That Ed was a little nervous because he thought they would get inside the truck and then bury them alive. Later on, the kidnappers let the students inside the truck one by one. They entered the hole in the roof of the truck, and they went down the stairs. The small children could not understand what had happened. The only ones who understood were about 14 years old male students. When they got inside the truck with Ed, they saw different shaped mattresses that were dirty. There was more food and water. Ed was observing the surroundings. He noticed that there were no holes in the truck. When he asked the kidnappers suddenly took the stairs and closed the roof of the truck. Then he heard something like there was a heavy object placed on the roof of the truck, which they used as a protective in case they tried to get out. Then they heard that it was as if there was dirt on the roof of the truck. Ed guessed that the ground was covering them, and the children crying were still people shouting, and there were still people fainting. Ed calmed them down, but even he couldn't do anything because of fear. Fortunately, he had a small flashlight in his pocket. He always carried it with him when he was driving. He opened it. He saw the children in tears. Later, 14-year-old students, named was Mike, dared and said, "Let's try to push the hole in the roof. Better by trying to escape than we just cry here." Ed, on the other hand, was happy with what Mike said. So, Ed did. He talked to the boys and told them to gather the mattresses and stack them. When all the mattresses had been gathered, and almost reached the roof of the truck, they pushed the roof, and also, they saw long wood inside the truck. This is what they will use to push the roof, while Ed below will serve as a force to push up the wood. Ed pushed the wood hard, while Mike was able to support at the top. The children were able to support the mattress, not to fall down even if they pushed it a few times. They could not open it, because something heavy had run through it. How many times they did it over and over again. And here, they feel tired because they haven't eaten since they left school. So other students poured water on their heads and other men to keep their bodies cool, so that they weren't weakened by the heat a few times. The wood hit the roof, but still nothing happened, so in their minds it looks like they will be buried alive. A few seconds later, the roof suddenly collapsed, and here the ground collapsed at the top of the truck. They were very happy, and they saw the outside of the truck. Ed wasted no time, and he stepped on Mike to get out of the truck. Ed released the children by stepping on his shoulder, while the man pulled the children up. The last to come out was Ed. About 16 hours they were inside the underground truck. Ed ran with the kids to the quarrying site to ask for help. They saw the guard of the quarry, and here the guard was shocked by what the guard saw, because the children and Ed were covered in a dirt of a soil, and he did not know where they came from. The guard wasted no time, and called police. Half an hour later, the police in quarrying site arrived. So, Ed told what really happened to them. The police were very surprised. Because of what happened, they also saw the truck buried in the ground. The police suspect whoever kidnapped that they have access to the quarrying site, because you can't bury the truck of 12 feet, the depth, if you don't go outside and enter in this quarrying company. And in such a big truck the suspect will spend a long time burying it. So, when the police investigated, their suspect was the son of the owner of the quarrying site. And this was the 24-year-old, named Frederick Newhall Woods, because he was the only one who came in and out of the quarry the other day. So, he was arrested after 2 weeks of kidnapping. They also arrested 2 of his friends, the brothers James and Richard Schoenfeld. When the police investigated, they found out that the 3 were in debt, even though they came from a wealthy family. They have a large debt because of the casino. They admitted that they need a lot of money, because they might be knocked out by the gangs they owe them. They don't want to tell their parents that they are buried in debt, because they are sure that they will be scolded. So, the solution they thought was to kidnap. They targeted to kidnap children, because they said it was too precious to the government. When they asked for dollars for ransom, they sure that the government would not hesitate and would give it to them, and then the children would not resist. The style of their kidnapping, that they have been saw in a movie that they watched with the title, The Day the Children Vanished. Here, they have obtained the style of burying the victims in the underground alive. The ransom they would have demanded would have reached $5 million, the day they were going to call the police on the phone. They could not enter the line, because the relatives called the students on the police station line one after another. So, they decided to spend a day first, for the case situation subsided over a day. Later the kidnappers saw on TV the escape of the bus driver and students underground. They are hiding, but the police were alarmed and they were caught. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. Meanwhile, the students in turn experience severe trauma. Thus, they undergo to their psychological debriefing, Ed and Mike, was received the award for their outstanding community service and their bravery. Because if not both of them, may no longer found alive. On past 30 years, the students would not forget what happened to them. So, they always just visited Ed's nursing home. Ed died at the age of 91 years old. If you have a large debt, what will you do to pay it off? Thank you for watching.